few people ask for some pelvic floor stuff, so I thought I would give you all some stuff that you can add for pelvic floor specifically, but then also just ways that you can work into your everyday stuff that is going to help keep your pelvic floor strong, as well as working on recovering it if that's the stage that you're in. So I'm Jacqueline Ernst. I am a nationally certified Pilates trainer. I have been teaching Pilates for, goodness, over 20 years, which makes me feel really old. And then I remembered that I got my certification the week after I turned 18. So that helps a little bit. But I am in Northwest Arkansas. It is chilly today, but I love the sunlight out of the big front door of my studio, so I have it open if you hear trucks or anything, or just enjoy the wonderfulness of the birds chirping while we go through some of this. So I'm going to start footwork, headrest wherever. Springs, we want to go with kind of medium to heavy. We don't want too much resistance because we want to start creating our own resistance, so we're not going to go super heavy. So I am on a peak machine, so I have 2 blue and 1 yellow. If I was at the other studio that I teach at, we use Balance Body, and I would do 2 red and 1 blue for this. And I have my ball squished in over here. I'm not going to hit it, but my ball is squished up over here for some stuff coming up. And then I do also have a band. You can use a magic circle if it's easier for you, or if that's what you have, but I have like a small little kind of loop here that I prefer, just because I bruise super easily. So magic circle, not always my friend. All right, so we're gonna start on our back. We are, oof, my headrest is down. So, scooching a little bit away from those shoulder blocks. Let's say we've done the basics of our footwork. When we're doing footwork, we're pressing out. As we come in, we're keeping that pelvic floor engaged as we return. So as we exhale to press out, we're exhaling, pulling our belly button in, pulling our ribs together, engaging that full core, and then also scooping that pelvic floor up. So sometimes that means that we need to engage our low back or imprint our low back a little bit more in order to get that, which is also why I want a little bit of a lighter spring here. So basic footwork, midfoot, heels, wherever you usually start, pressing out, exhale, pulling that pelvic floor in. You will need to stay just shy of blocking. If we straighten our legs all the way, we're gonna release that pelvic floor, which we don't want. We're keeping that pelvic floor engaged as we inhale, coming back in, breathing through our ribs and back. And then exhale, pulling it in again. Inhale, coming back. Keeping that pelvic floor as engaged as you can as you come back in. So doing this about 8 or 10 times. And then we're gonna come to a wide heels on stance. My feet are flexed, and I am fully engaging those feet to flex up as much as I possibly can. Here we're going to work on squeezing everything in, drawing those legs together, pulling that pelvic floor in as we extend out. And releasing, this is where our pelvic floor is going to want to disengage much quicker. We're keeping it as engaged as we can. And then pressing out, keeping it engaged as much as we possibly can, and then release. Press out, pulling it up, scooping it up, keeping it there as much as we possibly can, and release at the end. We'll do about 8 or 10 of these. And then after we've done 8 or 10 of these, we're going to move on. We're going to bring our toes on. So our baby toe is just by the edge of our foot bar stabilizer, and pressing out, dropping those heels under, pulling in that pelvic floor and releasing. So we've brought our legs in just a little bit, keeping that pelvic floor engaged. Keep it engaged as we come in, release, extend out, exhale, pulling that pelvic floor in, engaging that core, ribs knit together. So 8 or 10 of these, our feet are closer together, and then we're coming even one step closer, and we're gonna come into our Pilates V. So same thing, pressing out, pull that pelvic floor in, zipping those legs together, keeping our knees slightly bent the entire time. I find when I'm working pelvic floor specifically, my knees are going to be even more bent than my base bent knee not locking out my knees. That being said, I have hypermobility and my knees hyperextend just standing. Because of that, when my heels are together, my legs will never be straight. But what I want you to avoid is feeling it through your glutes. Keep those knees a little bit wider so that you can pull that pelvic floor in and release it here, not feeling it as much in our glutes. Oh, there's my garage door light thing off. I don't know how to take the timed motion sensor off of the light, sorry y'all. Good. So after that, take a break, do a butterfly stretch, just let your hips relax for a moment. This is really hip centric. If you have tight hip flexors, slowly get into this a little bit more. I would say with tight hip flexors, maybe do like, start with 5 of each and build up to that. Okay, we're gonna repeat the same 3 positions with our feet, but we're gonna do our feet parallel. So here, pressing out, pulling that pelvic floor in, you'll feel it is completely different engagement feel when we're in parallel versus when we're turned out. So keeping our feet wide and coming in, heels up on this one, or heels on, and then I'm coming halfway between my fist distance apart and my all the way wide, pressing out, engaging and releasing. Press out, pulling that pelvic floor up and keeping it in, releasing it at the end. So again, 5 to 10, depending on where you are with hip flexors or your level of strength. And then we are pressing out here. My heels are fist distance apart. Keeping my feet flexed. My ankle is kind of at that continuous angle the entire time. As I release in, I'm trying to keep that angle the same. Engage that pelvic floor as we exhale. Inhale, bringing it all the way back in. Good. Once we've done 8 to 10 of each of those, then we're gonna move on to something that is a little bit different. Some people may have not done this before, and that is totally okay. We're gonna come into internal rotation. So we're taking our heels all the way out wide. Our pelvic floor is nice and warmed up at this point. This is not something to do at the beginning of a workout or without warming up that pelvic floor. So external rotation here, heels are on. We're going to internally rotate. Your goal is to get to the point with your hips that you can touch your knees together. My feet are flexed. I am pressing out. As I press out, I'm engaging my pelvic floor, but my knees are gonna come apart. So it has this oppositional feel when you go into it. So pressing out, engaging that pelvic floor, keeping it engaged as you come back in. Note that difference you feel with the internal rotation versus the external rotation. Internal rotation is really good for pelvic floor engagement. So after we do both legs in internal rotation, we're actually going to go external and internal on our feet and then switch them over. So we're doing 10 internal rotation. And then I'm gonna take my right foot external rotation, left foot is internal rotation. My hips are staying straight. I'm pressing out and coming back in. Smaller range of motion, making sure that I'm keeping that pelvic floor engaged the entire time. Here you're most likely going to have to imprint more on that low back than our neutral spine, but we have that internal rotation, external rotation, so we're hitting those muscles just a little bit differently here. 8 to 10 of these, and then we'll switch and we'll go to the other side. Oof, my hip flexors are screaming today. So pressing out, keep this hip down. Don't let your hips roll over and your shoulders come up. Keeping everything square, rotating just our knees from our hips, but we're keeping this hip down. Smaller range of motion is totally normal here. It depends on your hip flexibility. Again, I have hypermobility and I was a professional dancer for many years. So my range of motion may be different than yours. It may seem crazy, the difference between yours and mine, and that's totally okay. Do what you're able to. Good, 8 to 10 of these. And then we'll come into a nice butterfly stretch. Just open everything up. Take your arms, open them up, opening up your chest. I'm gonna come grab my ball from wherever it is, drop my headrest down flat. We're gonna come into some bridging. So this is also based on your comfort level, what works best for you. I am going to take my ball and I'm gonna put it in between my calves, kind of at my ankles. Ball of the foot, or arch of the foot, or ball of the foot on, depending on where you are. I have the same resistance. I'm not going to move the carriage. That's an advancement we can do, and I can walk you through that 1 or 2 times. If you're moving the carriage, make sure that you are still on that lighter spring, even dropping 1 heavy spring down. But we are inhaling, exhale, we're going straight into articulation. So low back presses in, pelvis tilts up, pelvic floor is engaged as we roll up into our bridge. Good. And then squeezing that ball, squeezing through our heels and calves, not just our knees, and then articulating down. When we are squeezing just our inner thighs or the ball in between our thighs, I find we go more into glutes and external or outside hips versus working pelvic floor. And also that ball in between our thighs makes our knees just a little bit wider. Having it in between our heels, our calves, helps engage that pelvic floor because the resistance is farther away, and we stop thinking just squeeze your knees together. Instead, we're putting more thought into it, and we can engage that pelvic floor just that little bit more. be more purposeful. So articulating up as we exhale into our bridge, and then squeeze that ball. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and articulating down. Good. You can do it here, just you're going to have to very much squeeze that ball in to keep your legs parallel and not wide. Squeezing up, I'm feeling it more here instead of being able to really feel it and engage in my pelvic floor, which is why I like it in the other position. All right, well, mine doesn't squish under my reformer the way that it does for others. Okay, we are coming a little bit wider, articulate up, and then I am going to internally rotate one knee, internally rotate, bring it back. Other knee, internally rotate and up. Glutes are engaged, low back's engaged, ribs are knit together. And now I'm pulling in that pelvic floor as I internally rotate. Doing about 4 or 5 on each side, articulating all the way down. Leveling that up. One more is if you are ready for it, and that means that you are purposefully engaging that pelvic floor and you can feel the pelvic floor engagement above the glute engagement, then we're going to bring our feet, soles of our feet are pressing together, knees are out wide. Again, hypermobility. My butterfly is ridiculous. So articulating up. When we're in butterfly, it's all personal preference, whether you have your hands flat on the ground or if you're bringing them up. It just depends on what feels better for you. I know a lot of people like to put their elbows in. I like my hands down, depending on the day. Inhale, as we exhale, belly button pulls in, hips come up. We're coming up, adjusting our shoulders a little bit if needed, and then flapping our butterfly wings. Pelvic floor is engaged here, pulling up, trying to keep our hips level. This rotation is pulling that pelvic floor in with each one. Trying to keep your hips even. I know my right hip is lower right now. I think that's the way too many hours in the car lately. Good. And then articulating down. Good. For those who are wanting to extend the carriage while we are bridged, we're coming back into that parallel position. Articulate up. Pressing out and coming back in. Here's where we go back to that footwork. Exhale, pull that pelvic floor in. Bring it in, keeping that pelvic floor engaged. Pressing out, engaging that pelvic floor. And bringing it back in. And then articulating down. Oh, there we go. There's some footwork bridging variations you can do to add in that pelvic floor work. And then we can, we can come over to our side. I'm gonna take my band, I'm gonna put it in between, or put my legs inside it, bringing it up here. Again, you can do this with the magic circle. I bruise super easily, so I am not. And I'm grabbing my ball as a pillow because I can. All right. All right. I am here. I am internally and externally rotating. bottom leg is flat. You can even brace it on underneath your foot bar. Top foot is on the foot bar, internally rotating, externally rotating, internally rotating, externally rotating. So engaging it all the way, keeping it as engaged as you can while you externally rotate. This is also easily done on the floor. You don't need a reformer to do it. You can do it with your strap up over your knee. I find the angle is a little different, so I like to do it this way. Doing it both sides. After this, the leg is coming up, up and down, crossing center, internal rotation, so crossing center and coming up. If you want, you can draw off this knee, come all the way down and all the way up. Hips are stacked, shoulders are stacked, core is engaged, an internal rotation, pulling it up, keeping it engaged as we come up, in and up. There are some basic pelvic floor exercises you can add in to what you're already doing. You can work on while you're doing footwork in a class, in the specific positions. Remembering we're engaging that pelvic floor as we extend out, keeping it as engaged as we can till we come back to the foot bar. If it's still engaged, we release it at the foot bar and then starting over. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm happy to answer them. Again, my name is Jack. I live in Northwest Arkansas, so if you're local, come say hi. And I'm also, crazy enough, originally from Canada. I grew up outside Toronto, so if you are a Canadian, also come say hi and let me know if you have questions or anything else. And I hope you have a fantastic Wednesday.